What is James Wiseman's role going to look like for the Pacers this year, and why is it going to be a little different than last season in a better way? Plus, we got to look at the veteran free agency point guard market and talk about the Cavs for a little chat. It's all coming on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, much to get to, topics all over the place, because it's the offseason, and I have a lot of stuff that I want to cover that has not been talked about enough. One being James Wiseman, who for various reasons has not been talked about enough this offseason. I want to dive into his role, why it'll be different, and maybe better this year for the Pacers than last year beyond the obvious health status for him. I want to dive into the point guard market, the free agency market there, because just a few crumbs about the Pacers potentially looking towards guards that direction if they do make another addition prior to or in training camp. And then at the end, Danny Cunningham of Locked On Cavs had questions about the Pacers. He's going to grill me. We talk a little Cavs. It's a good time as we finish up our tool of all the Pacers rivals from the last two playoff runs. We start today, though, with James Wiseman for many reasons. One being recently, I was kind of just thinking about the Pacers roster and who I'd covered correctly, who needed more talk this offseason. I was like, man, I haven't barely talked about James Wiseman at all. Right? Basically, everybody else on the team, for some on-court reason or role or rotational reason or contract reason, has been getting some buzz or some discussion this offseason. And with Wiseman, it's been almost nothing. Like, the timing he got signed was the day that Kevin Pritchard spoke to all of us, and that's when he told us they were signing Wiseman, and the Hove trade was right before that, and then Miles stuff was right after that, and Isaiah Jackson was right after that, and this stuff has kept happening in a way that it kind of fell to the wayside. It was a shorter discussion about him. And the problem is for him, last year there was a lot more deeper, nuanced discussion because there's at least some low-level creeping in, like could he be behind Miles Turner in the rotation? And he was new last year, so there's a lot of intrigue and interesting discussions about what he could be, his role, things like that. And this time, a lot of that's not the case, right? The money situation, they signed Jackson for 3 years, $21 million, Wiseman for 2 years at the minimum, very low guarantees. They're both coming off an Achilles injury. It's very clear which one of them is higher. In the pecking order, they traded away real stuff for Jay Huff, just follow the trades of the money. Clearly, he's under Ajax and Huff in the rotation, right? That's not even that's just obvious, right? It's just how it is. He was already under Jackson last year. I thought, although we'll never truly know because of the way injuries shook out, and they traded for Huff for a reason. So he's clearly the third stringer. Fans know it, and he's coming off of the second major injury of his career, the meniscus, of course, with Golden State, this Achilles with the Pacers. So what's this going to be, right? The other things that popped up about James Wiseman made me wonder, what's he going to be, and what I should really approach talking about this is, one, I realize I need to talk about him just in general, and also let me know if you feel like I haven't covered anyone enough this offseason. I think we talked about everybody a good amount, or at least the required amount for their current situation, but off the top of my head, not a ton of Obi Toppin and Nesmith talk, for example. We can get to them if there's interesting stuff. But two, Carlisle got extended, and I talked about at that time how good Carlisle has been at development, why that made it even better for the timing for this to happen before a gap year. Well, guess what? James Wiseman's a development project, right? That's the perfect guy for a development team. That's the whole point of this kind of season, is taking a stab at a player and making them better. And if Wiseman can be that, then that's great. That's a good idea for the Pacers. And three, the reason it popped up in my feed today to really dive into him is he's changing his number. He's going to be numbering 11 next year. He was 13 last year. Tony Bradley has 13. Shout out to Tony Bradley for the number thievery. So let's start this discussion of James Wiseman and this season being different by actually talking about a bunch of other different players. And you'll very quickly understand the pattern of what's going on here. Part of where Jackson and Wiseman are going to be playing and have sort of non-overlapping roles is because they're both coming off Achilles tears. I bet back-to-backs are, especially early in the season, but if Jay Huff is healthy, maybe the full season, I bet they're off the table. Go back to Kevin Durant in 2020-21, was not playing back-to-backs. When he was healthy, wasn't happening. DeMarcus Cousins in 2018-19, guess what? He was not playing in back-to-backs. Rudy Gay played in some but not all back-to-backs after his Achilles tear, and he actually had some games, and this is similar to Wes Matthews, where they were both playing some back-to-backs, but sometimes when they would, the first game they'd play 15 minutes, and the second one they would play normal minutes. Klay Thompson didn't play back-to-backs after his Achilles injury. Obviously, a lot going on there with him. He missed 2 full seasons with other injuries as well. But that's like most of the important Achilles tears since Kobe's, obviously. And even he came back the next season and played and then got hurt again. And it was different, obviously. I'm not saying that that's related, but that's the last decade, basically, of Achilles tears. Most of them have either had soft minutes on back-to-backs or very much more recently haven't played back-to-backs at all. So my guess would be Wiseman is not going to play back-to-backs. But that also means Isaiah Jackson is not going to play back-to-backs. Look at that. There's 2 of them. You can stagger them. So there's going to be games where James Wiseman is just straight up in the rotation, not because someone's hurt, but just because of the schedule. They have a back-to-back for their second and third game of the year, right? I'd imagine Jackson plays one, Wiseman plays the other, Huff plays both. So Wiseman's going to play, and center's the most injured position, right? Jackson or Huff might get hurt. He's going to get chances this year, similar to the discussion last year, even if he's the third guy. So what's that going to look like, right? What can he be? Because the biggest Wiseman fanatics always point to preseason last year. And preseason's a small sample, but he played well in that small sample of time. 8.5 points and 5.8 rebounds per game, shot over 70%. And that's in like 13 minutes a game. Big statistical production. Now, everybody will talk about his defense. His defense needs work, certainly. Some nice numbers. Some on-offs are very unkind to him, right? He's going to have to get better on that end of the field, the floor, excuse me. But my pitch last year is similar to my pitch this year, but for a different time in Wiseman and the Pacers' careers, which is why this is different. He's huge. Like I said this last summer, but I have some new listeners, and I need to repeat it for a lot of you. I've been around hundreds of NBA players, and very rarely do I look at a large person now and go, whoa, they're huge. Like I've been around 7-footers all the time, right? Jalen Duren got me. Boban got me. Obviously, Wemby. James Wiseman was a whoa. Like, he's huge and he's jacked, right? So that, of course, is the thing that made me at least like, oh, what's this going to be? He had 7 total possessions of regular season play on the offensive end. I have nothing to say about that. That's such a small sample that it's impossible to take anything from. He did score 6 points. The Pacers won that game by 6. That was great. In preseason, he did well in transition. That's generally good for the way the Pacers played last year. He was a beast on his cutting, like from the opposite side of somebody in the post or from elbows or whatever, and his putbacks. And that's where I think for a Pacers team that struggled with rebounding, he might stand out the most. He was awesome in those ways. That's typically what he's been good at before, but that's really what he shined within a still small but larger than his regular season sample of preseason games. And so those got me thinking. Transition's one thing, but a lot of those plays might work better or at least have more like noticeable effect on a team with a slower style. Now, it's unclear if the Pacers are going to play slower. Kyle and I talked about that last month about should the Pacers tweak their play style? What should this look like? How could this go without Haliburton this season? And we both kind of were like, well, experimenting, he called it the czar of the zany, get weird. That doesn't mean slower, but it wouldn't shock me if their best way to win without Haliburton was a little slower than their natural pace last year. That could help Wiseman, right? That could be a way that he is just used in a way that helps. He's decent as a role man, but the phrase that I got to after going back into Synergy, watching a lot of his play types and stuff last year is he's kind of, and this is a compliment, even though this word is typically used in a negative way in the NBA, he's a garbage man. Trash plays, he cleans them up. He comes in with a rebound. He comes in from the side. He uses his size to make a trash play a good play. That's a good thing, right? And so that's what his season has to be about. Be himself, find his niche, make the plays that are there, and try to blend that into the Pacers style because the theory of him fits in better with not quite the Pacers style, and maybe it would have fit. We'll never know because he only played one game last year. But if he tries to add skills and get healthy and learn a new style, like that's a lot to soak in. Maybe he can do it. He soaked in some of that last year, but he only played one game, right? Who knows how comfortable it is. And so to me, this is the kind of year, and this is what I said when they signed him. This year makes more sense to have James Wiseman than last year for the Pacers to me. Last year, of course, they were young and trying to win, but I think the emphasis was more on winning, and they won 50 games. And had they played like they did from December onward, they would have won like high 50s in games, right? They were clearly trying to win. This year, of course, they're going to try to win with what they have, but people are calling it gap year, leap year, experiment year, whatever. And that is a year where development is more on the brain, where your ceiling is naturally lower. That's a better year to take a flyer on a Wiseman type. So I think this year for him is going to be figuring out the right combo of those 3 things: adding skill, getting healthy, blending into whatever style they play. But this is a better year to have Wiseman. And that's why I think him getting minutes for sure, him having that positive in a good way garbage man type of play, him potentially fitting in better the way they'll play this year. It's just all going to potentially filter into a better year for him as the third center. And of course, staying healthy is huge for him, because I can't say these on separate paths. I can't say, well, Wiseman isn't a player that I would have thought would be particularly good in the past, and Rick Carlisle's been a good development guy. I can't say those things talking about both sides of my mouth. It's totally possible that Carlisle develops Wiseman the same way he did with a bunch of other guys who came from other places and didn't look as good, and then were good with the Pacers. And so it's going to be fascinating to see what he is this year. It's going to be fascinating to see how much he plays, what role he's in, how it all looks. But they clearly value him, not only because they've seen his rehab, but because they've signed him 2 years in a row. Last year when I didn't think it made as much sense, and this year when it makes more sense, but he's coming off an Achilles tear. Both times they've wanted him back. They clearly think they can get something out of him, and we'll have to see what that is. But I think after diving back into what we saw in very limited times last year, there are ways that it could work, and the Pacers development staff deserves a chance with a player like that. But again, 2 major injuries in his career just makes it impossible to predict what this is actually going to look like. Coming up, let's look at veteran point guards. That still could be a thing for the Pacers this offseason, as they still might be done, but could tweak their roster more. Before we talk about any of that, we got to talk about OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber, maybe a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That is why you need OpenPhone, the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. They let you manage your business calls and texts from a single app. They have a shared inbox feature. It's a total game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Pacers listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have an existing number with another service, OpenPhone's going to port it over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Pistons or Knicks or something else, because Malik Beasley has maybe shifted his role. I would say I don't even know what the best way to put it is. Malik Beasley's investigation spot is different, let's say, and he played for the Pistons last year. And Kuka Hill will have more on that. I have been bothered by coverage of that. You can hear more about it from Locked On Pistons. Okay, let's keep it rolling here. We talked about James Wiseman. Something else I wanted to talk about more recently, because we heard Rick Carlisle talk almost 2 weeks ago to the day now on the radio about Tony Bradley's going to be in camp, right? They want their 4 centers in camp. Speaking of Wiseman, like, give you 2 guys coming off Achilles tears. Maybe you want 4 centers on your team, and that's all great. But we've also heard questions fielded about point guards. Do they want another point guard? Would they sign her? And the reasoning is obvious. They have Andrew Nembhard, they have TJ McConnell, and that's it. And this is a team that, one, has typically run 2 point guards on the floor at the same time in some of their best alignments over the years, but 2, figured out last year how challenging point guard depth can be, relying on Quentin Jackson, albeit he played pretty well a lot of the time in November. Like, guys are going to get hurt. McConnell's going to be 34 this year. Nembhard's going to be on a huge roll. Like, it is totally reasonable to think they could use a third point guard on the team. They have Cam Jones. They have Quentin Jackson. They have Ray J. Dennis. Those are quality guys to take a stab with. They're also all less proven. That's why when I've made the case for point guards they could pursue, I have typically wandered into the world of veterans, right? Guys who are table setters, caretakers, don't mess up that much with the ball in their hands in a way that makes it so if you're developing or you're trying to win, they're not a disaster, right? They're making it easier for their teammates, or they're just good enough that you're not getting smoked in their minutes. Now, that's hard to find. Players who can actually help at point guard are probably on a team now, right? It's very deep in the offseason. That's not to say they're not out there, but if they're going to pick someone, it's going to be tricky, because the other thing they could think about is go with a young guy, bet on their development program, seeing if they can make him good, but they have 3 young guards, point guards already, right? I already went through those trio of names. So how the Pacers kind of figure out if they would even pursue another guard, finding what that balance would be, is kind of challenging. Now, that's part 1 of this. Part 2 of this is something I always say and remind fans when talking about this stuff is, especially in free agency, when the other side has to agree, right? In the trades, it's just the team side. When a player has to agree too, the money or the role has to make sense for them. For example, Malcolm Brogdon is out there. Malcolm Brogdon's not taking a 5th guard, 3rd point guard role where he's not going to play. Maybe the Pacers would play their 3rd point guard right away, but who are they kicking out of the rotation, right? So, yes, Malcolm Brogdon's the best point guard on the market. He's been heavily linked to the Warriors, right? He might not even be available, but if he is, why would he want to take that spot, right? Unless he truly cannot get any other guaranteed money or spots. Gary Payton III falls into that category. Russell Westbrook, especially with this Kings interest being constantly reported, also seems to be in that category. So it's all about finding a vet, to me, who knows it's possible they're not going to play. In fact, maybe not play often at all, but could still have value when they play and is either interested in knowing they'll be on a team or knowing they're going to get guaranteed money. Because at this point in the offseason, that is hard to find. A lot of the deals you've seen signed recently of players you actually have heard of before are like $800,000 guaranteed, or Exhibit 10s even for some decent players. We're at that kind of stage of the offseason. So obviously some of these guys have stuff lined up pending what happens with Golden State. And I think once Golden State's done, then a lot of the teams that are at 13 roster spots will get their 14th guy. And that's all great. Like that makes all the sense in the world to me, but it's been going really slow. So who hasn't been linked to anybody, but is still available and fits all the criteria I described? I think there's some bets that are, I would say, quality and to me make some sense for a reason. Corey Joseph is one of them. He's played for the Pacers before. He has some table setting abilities. He's a decent defender. He doesn't have quite the Pacers pop offensively, but if you watch the Magic at all down the stretch of last year when they were really banged up at point guard or in the playoffs, he actually was pretty solid for them, right? Good enough to hold his own and not be a joke for them. Like totally changed my perception of what he is at this stage of his career. He was pretty good for them in a way that I think should prolong his career, but he is still not on a team. Monte Morris is a guy I've mentioned quite often here. Rough year for him 2 years ago, really injured with the Pistons. Didn't play that much for the Suns last year, especially if they were to also get Tyus Jones, right? Very confusing situation with his career because I always thought he was really good and now he's just not on a team. But like if he'd be willing to take just guaranteed money or back end stuff, like that's an interesting one. The rest of the guys are all like, sometimes they've been good, sometimes they haven't. Sometimes I've liked them, sometimes I haven't kind of dudes. For example, Patty Mills, he's a vet. Like he's had some nice moments. He's probably too old to really contribute, but that's kind of perfect, right? You know what he's playing. He's not going to be a joke, but he shouldn't be playing all the time. Delon Wright, every team that signs him, it's like, ooh, interesting. Delon Wright's defended well before. He's had some nice offensive moments, and then he doesn't end up playing as much as everybody thought. Cam Payne had some nice moments for the Knicks last year, even in the postseason, and then got benched in the series against the Pacers, but he's like a decent player. His defense was better last year than I thought. Another one, Markelle Fultz. He's kind of that middle ground between he was hurt to start last year, didn't sign with the Kings till late in the year, but is decent, is only 27. So in theory, could still get a little bit better. Who knows the exact specifics of what he wants, but the reason they can't sign him is he would ruin the fun. The stat about no first overall pick ever playing for the Pacers would be ruined. But in all seriousness, that's one I would totally understand. All those guys have like some reason I would get it. I think Morris, it feels the most kind of Pacers-y in the way he doesn't mess up that much. Corey Joseph is just good and solid. And as we saw with the Pacers, can kind of play the two a little bit just because he can defend. Fultz makes some sense because of his age. Payne, Wright, and Mills all have reasons that they're interesting. Outside of that, though, the point guard market is pretty dry, right? A lot of guys are on teams for a reason. You know, I've always liked Delano Banton. Jeff Dowden's decent after he got let go by Philly. Elfrid Payton was with the Pacers system for a long time, and he tore them up in that game last year, but like he's 31. So those guys are at least names that I'm like, if they sign them, I get it. Like I could explain it to you why they did it. And perhaps they'd be willing to take a very, very low amount of guaranteed money, which could be interesting for the Pacers, because the other thing that could be a factor here is I just talked about rolling money being important to the free agent. But if you're the Pacers and you're trying to truly have a camp competition with Tony Bradley, a totally non-guaranteed deal could be better, right? Then it's truly a competition. Winner gets money in a roster spot, loser doesn't, right? That would make sense to me too. But if they offer no guaranteed money and no role, the quality of player they could get would go down. And that's why some of those guys I said at the end would have a better chance in that case. You know, maybe a lightly guaranteed deal in case somebody gets hurt. But regardless, that's the kind of names to keep your eyes on if you think the Pacers should be pursuing a third point guard at this time. Some of them make good sense to me. Some make less sense, but like aren't a joke. None of them are so bad or useless that I couldn't explain it to you if that's who the Pacers ended up choosing at some point. But the market is interesting. I think that anything that would happen won't happen until the Warriors do stuff. They've still done nothing. Eventually, someone is going to crack, by the way. This is a Pacers show, so no one cares too much about this. But, you know, Jonathan Kuminga is a restricted free agent, and all the restricted guys, him, Giddey, Cam Thomas, Quentin Grimes, Ben Mathurin, keep your eye on like the situations between all those guys and similarities because he'll be restricted next year. Regardless, if this Kuminga thing drags on forever, all these guys who want to sign with the Warriors, like they can't work out. If they get hurt, they lose money, right? One of them eventually is going to be like, come on, Like, figure it out or I'm going somewhere else. And that's when I think things will kick off. Everybody keeps talking about the deadline for the qualifying offer. And like, that's something I think training camp's a more pressing deadline than that even would be. And I think even beyond that, like we're a month out from camp, in some cases less, like eventually someone is going to say, all right, figure it out or this is not happening. And that's going to make action happen. So that will make the market go a little bit on some of these guys that are at least decent players still out there, because there's still several teams, not several. There's still a few teams that are like below the roster limit and need a 13th player. In the Nets case, need to add some money. So anyway, some interesting stuff will still happen this offseason. Perhaps the Pacers get involved. The Cavs did some interesting stuff this offseason, and Danny Cunningham wanted to ask me about the Pacers. Let's talk a little Cavs and a lot of Pacers to close out today's Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, we need to talk about FanDuel. Today, August 26th, it's FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just these 24 hours today, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, today is the day. This is your moment. Take a flyer on the MVP race. Who's your pick? Could be anyone interesting. Is it going to be Mahomes again? Is someone else going to sneak in there? You can crown your champion right now in August. Eagles again, Chiefs again, someone new. The AFC is going to be crazy. Parlay your division winners and your dark horses right there on FanDuel. Visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning your future bets now, because FanDuel Futures Day is one day away and one day only on FanDuel. Play your game. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen should be Locked On Cavs, because the Cavs are a division rival for the Pacers. They played in the playoffs last year. Danny Cunningham is the host of Locked On Cavs. He had questions about the Pacers. Here's me talking to him for 10 minutes. We do dabble into a little bit of Cavs.
And joining us now, somebody that I think a lot of you know pretty well at this point after the postseason, Tony East does a fantastic job over at Locked On Pacers, and I think things are rather different right now for the Indiana Pacers than they were the last time we spoke, Tony, because Tyrese Haliburton, who had a fantastic postseason, tears his Achilles in Game 7 of the Finals. Miles Turner also thought he had a pretty good postseason, now a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. So what's going on in Indianapolis?
The gap year term was coined by the Celtics. The Pacers are also in that group now, right? And it's a stinky term because the Pacers are still pretty young. Like, a gap year for them is different than a gap year for Boston, in that playing their young players are still playing primarily, basically outside of Siakam and McConnell, their best players. So they'll still be scrappy and annoying and win 40 games or something like that. But their ceiling is way lower. Their chance of winning a playoff round is minuscule. So your priorities have to change, even if that by default you have too much talent to lose. And that's kind of the odd little balancing act that they're going to have to do this year.
So how does having too much talent to lose find like that weird balancing act of expectations are reasonably not high? Like, I don't think anybody inside that organization, I know nobody nationally, I know myself, I have gone out on a limb and said the Pacers are not going back to the finals next year. I know that's a pretty bold take, and I'm not sure you agree with that one or not, but how do they balance those expectations, growing their young guys, but also knowing that this could be an opportunity, considering that they did make that trade during the finals for their first round pick next year, which had nothing to do with Tyrese Haliburton's Achilles and was kind of just a tax move more than anything that turned out to be a stroke of luck. How do they balance maybe trying to grow the young guys they have versus maybe taking this as a true gap year and maybe finding themselves in the lottery?
Yeah, it's interesting because even like pretend Haliburton is healthy and Miles Turner is back on the team, right? Nemhard and Mathurin and I guess Toppin, he's older but less experienced, and Ben Shepherd and Jarris Walker and Isaiah Jackson, like all those guys are guys that even if they made no free agency additions, you'd say, oh, they should be better, right? Or like at least as good as they were last year. And so the Pacers should get some improvement there. All those players are going to play still for the Pacers this year, right? And so if you shift your season completely to development, which, I mean, who knows what the Pacers' true center will be in terms of that, they still are doing that. Aaron Nesmith as well. That's their best players. Like the only guy I didn't say who's like kind of good and young is Johnny Furphy. Like everything else is not important in terms of really like long-term focused. Maybe their rookie Cam Jones, we'll see how good he is. So it's really strange that they have to meld those two things. Whereas like if you went into the season and said you're trying to win, that's how I would have thought they'd be better, is that they just have a lot of young talent that could make them internally slightly better than last season. So now the question is, can those players be good enough to win them games. The East sucks, right? Like, the Cavs know well, like they are very heavy favorites to at least make the conference finals just because of how bad the conference is. Like they're playing on Christmas and opening night against the same team because there's only 2 teams. So like who is saying that the Pacers can't win however many games just by playing their young guys, right? And so that is kind of the tough reality where you're right that like if you truth serum to everyone in the organization, like look, the BYU kid, I don't know how to say it, Debansa,
AJ Debansa.
AJ Debansa, yeah, like the Boozer kid at Duke, like look at that. Pascal Siakam, if you could like very, very, very slightly tweak your ankle and we sit you for a month, that'd be great. Like, yeah, that's like kind of an ideal, but they can't. They're like their young players are too good to even do that unless they sit all them too. And then it's like, what are you even doing? Like, what is even the point of this season? So they kind of have to go in the middle of those 2 paths and just kind of let the chips fall where they may and see who's good enough to clearly be a part of whatever they're going to be when Haliburton does come back, because he's not going to be the same guy as he's kind of acknowledged.
So I want to get to Haliburton in a second, but the way you describe that kind of makes me feel as if of the teams that are in the middle, or I guess like bottom of the middle, whatever you want to term it, like the Eastern Conference is not good. And I definitely push back on the notion that it's wide open. I think there are 2 teams that are unproven and a couple of other teams that might be dark horses and a bunch of other teams that kind of stink.
It's not wide open. It is wide open to finish in 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I think that is the way to describe it. But as you describe the Pacers, I look at them and I just wonder, do they have the smallest gap this season? Like this season only, this is completely a Tyrese Haliburton thing right here. But do they have the smallest gap between what their floor is in terms of how high the floor is and how low the ceiling is conversely?
Yeah, probably, right? And especially with their win total. Like, the Celtics, for example, who are in a similar situation because of Tatum, like they could win if Derek White gets hurt or if Jaylen Brown gets hurt, like they could win 25 games, right? Like
that is on the table for them in a way that I think might not be for the Pacers.
I agree with you. Like it's so hard for them to, because like I said, their top 10 is good. Furphy's right outside there. Then after that, there's a big drop, I suppose. But when you have 11 like good enough players, and if you count James Wiseman as good enough 12, that like they'll survive. So it's just really hard for them to be awful, right? Especially like they'll clean up against even without Haliburton or Turner. They should be way better than Charlotte, Washington, all the crap at the bottom of the East and squeak by those. And they're as good as the Bulls, I'd say. So there's some nice division wins like that. They even last year when Haliburton was out, they went, I think 4-4, 4-3. Like they beat Minnesota without him. They beat some good teams even in his absence, right? The Cavs, he got hurt at halftime of that game and they won in Cleveland, right? During the season. So
they were losing at halftime and they crushed the Cavs in the second half of that game.
Right. So they can beat enough teams that they can win. I'd say their range is 35 to 45, but like that's still in the same like tier of team. You're in the middle of the East. I don't see them going much worse or better than that, because unless Siakam is just like a god this year. So and him being so consistent is part of why their floor is so high too. He was great all of last year.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And then as far as Haliburton goes, we know they have come out and said that he's not going to play next year. Obviously, when you tear your Achilles in the final possible day that you could do it in NBA action, Game 7 of the finals, going to lead to a long recovery. And there should be no expectation that he's on the floor whatsoever next year. Is there any long-term concern that Tyrese Haliburton has already peaked and is not going to be able to be what he has been, which obviously has been an incredible basketball player?
I mean, has anybody been better post Achilles? Like Durant is the face of recovery from the injury, and he was really fantastic, like all NBA level, obviously. But was he better, straight up better? No, right? Maybe as good. So that's your hope, is that the injury, the recovery from the injury is better than it ever is, and it will always be better. Like next year will even be better than us talking right now, and that he is 25 and he can come back and be, where he was, like second, third team All-NBA contender. And his play style is so unique that if he can still just read the game really well and fling the ball around and never turn it over, he'll still be very good, right? So and he's not like a burst to get by you kind of player. So I think that he would hope that he would be close to as good, right? Or as close as is reasonably possible within the injury. But yeah, I mean, like no one is going to hit that peak, and they'll have to have that drop off covered by other players. Nembhard, Nesmith, Mathurin, whoever gets better. The problem is they lost their starting center as well. And so that's why this season is about, learning what you have with your young guys in a way that's like who actually is a part of the next great Pacers team who actually can make up for what they lose without Haliburton, and who's a part of the, let's say, center trade package or less important group for the team?
So the Miles Turner stuff. How surprised were you? How surprised were the Pacers when that all went down and he goes to the Milwaukee Bucks via free agency after the Bucks waive and stretch Damian Lillard and do all the maneuvering that they needed to do to make that happen? Because I look at that and, I don't know that I love that for the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think that Turner's value certainly had a lot to do with how good he was alongside Haliburton, which is somebody that the Milwaukee Bucks obviously have no one that's close to in terms of playing style. Now he'll get to play next to Giannis, so I don't necessarily feel bad for the guy, but how surprising of a day was that when all of that came out?
Yeah, very weird. Like I was trying to just get like what the heck is going on details. And so I didn't really tweet until I knew kind of stuff. And people were like calling me like, are you okay? Why have you posted? Like it was a shocking day because of that. People were so concerned of just about the whole ecosystem of how this went down. Yeah, it's a very memorable day, right? Like I certainly think they read the market and thought there'd be no one that could pay him as much as them. And they started too low. And that, led Turner to have wandering eyes and look at this. There's the deal he wants. Why would he, if he could have come back, maybe the Pacers would have matched it. I think they would have been close to it, but maybe not all the way up to it. So yeah, I think they were shocked. I don't think they would have negotiated if they didn't want to keep him and planned to keep him, right? As they have said, and as Turner, has indicated in the way out. So yeah, I think very surprising. Like even if they don't have Haliburton this year and they're a 40 whatever win team, like Turner is as what I would consider as close to the perfect fit for a Tyrese Haliburton point guard as possible. Somebody who can finish at the basket, dunk a little bit, and space out for three. Like creating options that Haliburton can read quicker than the defense opens up a lot of shots, right? And he even talked about that. He said, I thought my dream fit as a big was Rashawn Holmes. No, it's like a Miles Turner kind of player. So figuring out how they can replace that's going to be hard. And I think they wanted to keep him and we're like, well, crap, we got to pay the tax on Haliburton. This sucks. Let's negotiate. And it really bit them in the butt.
What a compliment for Rashawn Holmes that was to be viewed as the ideal.
Have you seen this? I tweeted about it this offseason, like 2 weeks ago.
I didn't see it this offseason, but I had heard it before. And it's
one
so
of those
funny
random accounts that just tweets like nonsense NBA highlights. And I don't mean that as an insult. Like I like those. Tweeted like Rashawn Holmes floaters, and Haliburton like retweeted it was like the most automatic shot basketball or something like that. They were Kings buddies, man.
Has he seen an Isaiah Hartenstein push shot? Because
yes, they've played Hartenstein in the playoffs 2 years in a row. They are all about the Isaiah.
That is the most automatic shot in basketball.
That shot looks so weird. So
it does.
The
Knicks
Cavs. Oh no, he's on the Thunder now. I'm stupid. Never mind. They'll see it at some point again this season.
He played for the Cavs at one point. They have seen it. They're very familiar with it. It is the most automatic shot in basketball.
He did.
I will get you out of here with this. If you were running the Pacers this summer, and obviously the situation in Indiana is very unique because of the Haliburton injury. But is there something that the team did not do or tried to do and couldn't do that you thought should have been done aside from keeping Miles Turner?
No, not really. I mean, my thought was keep Turner, stay close enough to the tax that if it's a disaster after re-signing him, you can get under and do a thing here or there at backup center and figure it out. So honestly, no, like if they had Turner, the rest of their offseason makes so much sense, right? I like the trade they made to get their first back. It makes all the sense for their situation. I don't know enough about the draft, but like Cam Jones looked nice in Summer League. Taylor Peter looked nice in Summer League. Jay Huff's contract is nothing, and he's like a rotation caliber player, and they got him for nothing. Like that's a good backup five. I would not have paid Isaiah Jackson as much as they did, but they know his recovery better than anybody, and he's like a fine center, a rotation level center. So outside of maybe overpaying him slightly, like I think every move they made makes sense, but all those moves make more sense if Miles Turner is the starting center. So that's where it's a little weird is that the context of it has changed. Their center rotation's about to be Isaiah Jackson and Jay Huff for a team that's like not bad enough to tank. So it's just weird because of that. But no, everything else they did is good. That's why they're great. Like their grade should be bad because the biggest thing they had to do, they messed up. But all the small stuff adds up to like D plus C minus level offseason stuff.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, and I think that they will be a team right around 40 wins next year.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. We've now got through all of the Pacers rivals from the Eastern Conference playoff field the last 2 seasons. Perhaps we'll do more of these again with other teams if it feels right to me. I'm about to do a show with Locked On Raptors later this week. We'll see if it makes sense for this feed or not, but tomorrow's the off day here for this week of Locked On Pacers. Thursday, so much to get to. Haliburton spoke. TJ McConnell is going to throw out a first pitch. So much coaching staff news for the Pacers. Some other front office stuff. So many things to dive into. You'll get it all here on Thursday and Friday. What are the odds? Comes back for another go around. Thank you all so much for listening today. Back tomorrow talking more Pacers. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.